Yeah, and hello. Welcome to the first Gilmore Way podcast of 2023. We may have just started a new year, but here at TGW, we're going to spend the next little while living in the past because we're going to be discussing the nostalgia factor of the show.
Mm-hmm.
The common thread that I found with the episodes this week was the tendency to want to cling to the past. We get it with Luke needing to let go of Rachel and her sweater, of looking at past models of domesticity in the Donna Reed show and thinking that they seem idyllic despite the oppression of women at the time. And also in Lorelai examining the path not taken with Christopher, and clinging to the idea of a family with Rory and Chris. There are so many different facets to nostalgia to explore, both in universe in the show and how we as a fandom react to it in the real world. So I think this will be a fun conversation.
Yeah, it definitely will be. We would once again like to remind you that this podcast may and will contain heavy spoilers for the entire series and the revival. So if you haven't caught up on the show, it's 2023. Great time to set a New Year's resolution to do so. And before we get to going, please just remember to hit that thumbs up, click the red subscribe button. We're eternally grateful for all of that, and that really helps us out. With that said, let's jump into those recaps.
Okay, season 1, episode 13 is Concert Interruptus. Lorelai is hosting the donation drop-off for the town rummage sale, which throws their house into chaos. Luke drops off a bag of donations, including a hat and a sweater that Lorelai decides to purchase for herself. But when she wears the sweater to the diner, Luke flips out. Lorelai later finds out the sweater used to belong to Luke's ex-girlfriend Rachel, and she's suddenly very curious about this woman. Meanwhile, Rory is assigned to a debate team featuring Paris, Madeline, and Louise, and they end up coming out to Stars Hollow to work on their project. Suki obtains 4 tickets to see the Bengals in New York, and Lorelai comes up with the idea to give the tickets to the girls as a bonding experience. While at the concert, Madeline and Louise decide to go off with some older boys to a party, causing Lorelai to go on a manhunt for them. Despite the drama, we see a softer side to Paris and some progression in her friendship with Rory.
Mm-hmm. That's followed up by episode 14, That Damn Donna Reed. During a pizza dinner at the Gilmore house, when they're watching the Donna Reed show, Dean comments that he thinks the idea of a housewife at home making dinner for her husband is kind of nice. And this causes strife with Rory. After they have a fight, Rory does a little research on Donna Reed and decides to put together a date night for Dean at Babette's, where she's kitten sitting for their new baby apricot. The dinner features a steak dinner and an orange gingham dress with petticoats and all. Lorelai offers to help Luke paint the diner, and sparks fly when they're discussing color schemes, and Luke tells her the stories about the place when it was his father's hardware store. When Lorelai returns home, she finds that Rory's midterm, a chick that she's named Stella and is responsible to supervise, has escaped from her cage, and she calls Luke to help corral the chick, which Luke thinks might be code for, "I'm not wearing any underwear."
Stella! Episode 15 is Christopher Returns. Christopher comes to Stars Hollow for the first time, and the town is obsessed. He accompanies Lorelai and Rory to Friday night dinner, and Emily invites his parents, Strobe and Francine, as well. This, predictably, does not go well, and Strobe decides to open up the old wounds of Lorelai's teen pregnancy and Christopher's squandered potential. In an attempt to escape the drama, Chris and Lorelai go outside to Lorelai's balcony and end up having sex. The next morning, Christopher asks Lorelai to marry him and says he wants to be a family, but she turns him down because she still doesn't believe he has his ish together.
Spoiler, honestly, he doesn't.
A spoiler, his credit card gets declined when he tries to buy an Oxford English Dictionary, which granted is like $400. So that's not an El Cheapo book. But still, he likes to pretend he has it together, but he does not. But
yeah. That's almost a classic Christopher MO, but go on.
Yeah. This batch is probably some of my least favorite episodes from season 1, although I do love Christopher Returns. It's really great to finally meet Rory's dad and to see the chemistry between Lorelai and Christopher, and therefore Lauren and David in real life. Like, they really did have that sort of spark that made them really believable as old friends and teenage sweethearts. So that was really cute to see. But I don't love the concert episode, and I don't love the Donna Reed episode. But I do like that we get a little more Paris softening up. That it's nice to see her sort of have fun and not be all up in Roy's grill all the time.
Yeah. I take issue with Donna Reed and certain aspects of that episode and what I think Amy was trying to drive home, but we'll hit on a lot of those points when we do our feminism episode. I don't dislike Concert Interruptus, I think, in the same way that you do. I actually enjoyed it. I think it was just a really I loved the episode for what it was in terms of how we see Rory and Paris start to like thaw the ice between, you know, what the hostilities that have been between them, and their friendship starts to really, I think, grow in that episode. So I enjoyed seeing that. I liked seeing the music aspect of it in New York City and the Bangles, and just Suki and Lorelai kind of sacrificing that to allow that friendship to blossom. So I enjoyed that. Christopher returns. Yes, absolutely. It's nice to finally get to meet Rory's father. He doesn't stick around for long, but he makes an effort. And even though we get more from him in the future, I think this was just really good groundwork for seeing the type of father that he's trying to be and the type of investment he's trying to have in Rory's life at this point.
Yeah, I don't dislike these episodes. I just think they're not as strong. And when I go back to rewatch, sometimes I just skip right over them because I don't have as much love for them or as much nostalgia for them, which I suppose leads us into our main topic, which is nostalgia. Yep. So what even is nostalgia? I suppose is a good place to start, because the definition is a little bit wonky, and it used to mean something different than it means now. So actually in the past, they used to consider it a medical condition, like an extreme form of melancholy. It was basically pathological homesickness.
Homesickness, yep, I've seen that.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Greek root, the etymology of the word, the first bit, nostos, is homecoming. And then algos means sorrow. So it's like the sorrow to return home, which is interesting because, you know, there's so much nostalgia for the show. Like, people love returning to Stars Hollow as if it's home. People feel homesick for a place that doesn't even exist, which is the power of this show and of that town to feel like a real place that people want to be. It feels like it's stuck in time somewhere in the middle of Connecticut, and it just exists, like Lorelai says in the revival. It feels like it exists in a snow globe. So
maybe it does. Crackpot theory.
Crackpot theory. Wasn't there a TV show where the finale, they revealed that the entire thing was happening in a snow globe?
I think I know what you're talking about. It was Under the Dome, based on a Stephen King novel. And yeah, like this dome drops down on this main town, and no one can get in and out for years at a time. And like, the spoiler for that end result is just that it was aliens and extraterrestrial beings who had kind of put this town into a snow globe as like their own little alien school experiment.
We have that book at my work. I work at an antiquarian bookstore, and I was like, oh, this looks like a really interesting one to read. I've never read any Stephen King. I don't think that's what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of, I want to say something else, where it was like a long-running TV show, and they sort of like, at the end, were like, psych, the whole thing just happened in a snow globe.
Yeah.
And it's like part of a larger cinematic or televisual, what do you call it? Like televisual universe, sort of like the MCU, only for TV. But I can't remember what it is. But Under the Dome does sound good. But thanks for the spoilies.
Yeah, no worries.
I probably could have figured that out on my own.
Yeah, go read the book anyway. I mean, it's a good one. But
speaking of books, nostalgia is sort of an important trope in romantic literature. And I think Amy draws a lot from that in the writing of Stars Hollow, and especially of Lorelai. Because, you know, romanticism is so much about individuality and extreme emotion. And, you know, just that desire to really be yourself and to be completely unique and creative. You know, being derivative is practically a sin in the romantic philosophy. So to me, it feels like Lorelai. You know, she is so much more in tune with her emotions than some of the other people we see in the show. I mean, she still has some work to do in that department, but at least she's able to sort of like recognize and work with her emotions in a way that some of her family members just can't. And it's the other thing that it lauds is spontaneity, which again feels very much like Lorelai.
Mm-hmm.
She's just all about being herself and expressing herself freely and not letting external rules dictate what you do, just being fully yourself. And that's the definition of artistic genius in romanticism. So I think Amy's trying to draw from that. You can see some of the influences on her writing from the romantics. We have mentions of Lord Byron and Poe, and I think even Hawthorne is another one that I think Scarlet Letter comes up. So some of these very well-known Americana romantic authors seem to have had some sort of influence on her. So I thought that was really interesting that, there's so much emphasis on literature and culture in the show. So to look at it through a lens of one of these, these intellectual movements and to look for the influences is kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amy, as always, knew what she was doing. She is nothing short of brilliant. But I love how the romanticism that we get from nostalgia, it can be so broadly defined where it's not necessarily about a relationship with a singular person or even a group of people. It can correlate to a town, a community, an environment, and that's what we get with Stars Hollow. But it can also, again, go and break down with individuals where Lorelai gets nostalgic with Christopher and what she had with him as a teenager. She gets nostalgic with certain aspects of Stars Hollow. So does Rory down the line when she eventually isn't there full time and she goes to college and starts living her life beyond that scope. But I love how you can romanticize not necessarily just a person, but an environment and a place too. And I love how we see that play out within the show. And it just makes me think of if I ever got to talk to her, I would just want to ask what Amy's nostalgia is for Connecticut and the Mayflower and how her love for that and how she almost in a way, I think, romanticized that. And that was her inspiration for creating what she did. But again, I just love how it can be so broadly defined and you can draw upon nostalgia from so many different things in your life, not just one person or one place.
Right. Nostalgia is usually associated with positive feelings. It comes out of sometimes a loneliness or a separateness that can happen to people. You can be surrounded by people and still be lonely. And it's funny how it works, how nostalgia and thinking back on positive social experiences actually helps people feel less lonely because they remember a time in their lives when they were connected to something else and it helps them. So it's sort of counterintuitive how important and restorative nostalgia can be for people. And I think that's why in times of distress or separation, loneliness, change, coming back to things that are comfortable is so healing to us. And it's why so many people return to Gilmore year after year after year and just finish it and hit start right all over again and head right back to the pilot.
What's that like?
Never done that.
That's not our circle of life at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I love how too, it's not, I mean, for us, but I think for a lot of people who love Gilmore Girls, that nostalgia factor doesn't just kick in the fall. That's kind of a year-round thing where it's just such a comfort zone and something that is just so warm and enveloping that you're just going to hit it. You're just going to go back to it year round. It doesn't have to be fall rewatch season. I will watch it any month, any time of year, just because it brings me back to even just thinking about when I was watching it as a teenager and I was first discovering this show and getting so excited over new episodes dropping because television was still television. We didn't binge things. So I had to wait for a new Gigi episode to drop all the time. But it was so exciting to see those new episodes come out and have that be something that I look forward to. And I personally feel nostalgic for that, where I miss those times where I was not knowing what was coming and I was just seeing the Gilmore drama unfold and seeing these new episodes play out. And I miss that. And I think there are a lot of people too who maybe caught this show as a teenager as well. And you think back to that time, just what your life was like then. And that's a really positive, nostalgic moment that you can draw from the show for that reason. And I think just too, like relating to the character at that age, relating to Lorelai, relating to Rory, seeing that play out, there's a lot that can come into play there. But I miss the nostalgia of that. So I get always wanting to rewatch it for so many different reasons.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an interesting case study here because I didn't watch it when it first aired. I did not come to it until 2016 when it was airing on Netflix around the time the revival came out. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a nostalgia for watching it when I was younger, but I get this sort of like weird vicarious nostalgia from rewatching it and feeling like I was there with everyone, even though I wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
which is funny. Like, there's just something about this show that like draws you in and makes you feel like you're there and you're with everyone all the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
this strange phenomenon where you have nostalgia for a time and a place that never existed for you. So, yeah, it's funny how, I was 26, so I was sort of smack dab in the middle of where Rory was with her high school and even her Yale years,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't yet as old as Lorelai. I wasn't into my 30s and dealing with motherhood and any of those kinds of things yet either. So I was more just bored at home and looking for something to watch while doing jigsaw puzzles because I love a good jigsaw. But which I guess comes from a nostalgia in my own life, doing them with my grandparents at like Christmas
Mm-hmm.
family events, right? So
Yeah.
um yeah, so it holds some warm fuzzy memories for me, even though I've only really been watching it just over 6 years. I still somehow feel that early aughts nostalgia. I think maybe it also triggers up other things that I was doing at the time. Like, obviously when those of us who are in our 30s now and we're watching this as it dropped, we have nostalgia for that time as adolescents sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It may not have been
Mm-hmm.
a perfect time for all of us. The teen years can be fraught with troubles, but
Mm-hmm.
it was still a simpler time in our own lives. There was less stress, there was less to worry about, things were less complex. And so it's natural to want to reach back in our memories to that time when we were, you know, young and just discovering all this stuff for the first time.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And what I love about the Gilmore Girls, just fan base in general and the community, is just that it's always been so enveloping, where it doesn't matter what time or at what age you discovered the show. Like, there's always fans in a community that's going to take you in and just be like, yes, one of us, you know, and just always want to talk to you and bring you in and have conversations with you and, just yeah, dive into it with you in that way. But I think you hit the nail on the head too, where, yeah, sometimes you just think back to when you would watch it, and that hits a chord for me where, at 14, 15, 16, when I was really getting into this show, I didn't really have the same cares in the world that I do now in terms of adult responsibilities. So it was just, the pressures of going to school and being up against a lot of the same things that Rory was facing. But there were no societal or adult pressures that I was really contending with in an extreme way at that point. And so I think the nostalgia factor comes from just, like you said, just not having the same responsibilities and pressures put on you that you have now. But again, just flashing back to a time where I'm nostalgic for being able to relate to Rory on screen as a teenage adolescent, just trying to navigate the waters of high school. Now that we're both watching it in our 30s, I think we would both, we relate more to Lorelai sometimes for certain things. But yeah, I miss watching it as a teenager sometimes and just having a different mentality with how I was seeing things play out.
Yeah. Despite not watching it when I was a teen, it does make me nostalgic for my teen years. I definitely see myself in Rory, especially in Nick and Nora Sid and Nancy, when it's her first day of junior year and she's like trying to make her mom hurry up so that they can get to
Mm-hmm.
school. She's like, I'm just excited. That was me. That was totally me. I remember getting up at like 5 a.m. for my first day of high school because I was so excited to go to a new school and to start a new school year.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who know me, you know I am like, if I'm up at 5 a.m., I've either been up all night or I have a flight to catch against my will. Like,
Can attest,
I
it's true.
I am not a morning person. I am not someone who gets up that early, and it caught up to me. I was extremely tired at the end of that day. But like my body was just so, pumped up on adrenaline from being so excited that it just woke me up at 5 a.m. and I was like, might as well get up and get ready. So 2 hours early. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the things that people like us who love school think of with the show as well, the nostalgia for the school days in their lives. And um, they love fall. I love fall. You love fall. We all love fall. And Stars Hollow sometimes seemingly feels like it's perpetually fall, despite the fact that they filmed in Burbank.
Yep.
So there's this like this feeling of warmth and comfort just from the cinematography and the colors used and the set dressing and all of those things that harken to fall and make us feel like we want to be wearing a cardigan and curled up under a blanket with a cup of tea. And it's so comforting to people to feel that way, whether it's 80 degrees outside or whether it's the dead of winter, to just snuggle up mentally with something like that. And it's sort of, I think we've seen a lot of it in the culture, maybe the last, 10 years or so. We've really seen this commodification of fall. Tiffany Ferg on YouTube just did a wonderful video about this a few weeks ago. Go check her out. That was a fantastic video. And I think she even references Gilmore Girls in it because it's just so top of mind when you think of this. But just how, fall is sort of when things start to get very much so commodified. Think of Starbucks as a really great one. The minute September 1st hits, you've got pumpkin drinks and everything is pumpkin and Halloween decorations are out and Thanksgiving decorations are out. And then the minute November 1st hits, suddenly the Christmas drinks are out. So it's this sort of like cyclical consumerist cycle. Cyclical cycle. Look at me go. Words are great. Yeah, this consumerist cycle where the minute there's like a crispness in the air, and even sometimes when it hasn't chilled out yet, we want the feelings of comfort and we will buy them if we must. So yeah, and Stars Hollow feeds into that.
Yeah, sometimes I think it can be, I will admit that I can very much be one of those like, oh no, it's too soon for that sort of thing. Like I hate that it gets to be September 1st sometimes and we're rolling out Halloween decorations and it's like, I just want one more week of beach days. And I love Christmas and I love that time of year, but sometimes it can be too soon. This is random and a brief side tangent, but I just want to call it out because it made me happy to see it happen. Saturday Night Live this year acknowledged Gilmore Girls. And in one of their promos, when Miles Teller was hosting, he did a short little clip with Bowen Yang just saying, it's fall, it's Gilmore Girls rewatch season. And I just wanted to bring it up because it was so heartwarming for me to see, but that such a cultural, like, and just this huge cultural sound piece that we still have going on today, Saturday Night Live still airs, is recognizing a show that was on decades ago, but still calling back to it because they recognize its significance. So yeah, there's still nostalgia for it, and it's still just being seen as something where it's fall, it's that time of year, go rewatch the show.
Yeah, when even Miles Teller is calling it out, you know that like you're hitting on a vein with people. So I love that. Yeah. But yeah, kind of bringing us back to September and school. I know I personally loved school and I miss school, and like every year in September I always like have an urge to even like take a community college course just to do something academic and feel like I'm going back to school, because that was always my favorite time of year. I'm such a weirdo that way. Most people are like, I love summer because beach days and sunshine, and I'm like, no, take me back to school. Like, That's where I want to be. So it makes me think of this trend that I've been seeing on the internet of romanticizing studying. And I think Rory Gilmore is a huge part of that. Basically, every video out there that you watch on, the romance of studying, or how to romanticize your study sessions, aesthetic studying, all of that. Like, everyone mentions Rory Gilmore. She's been such an inspiration to people in terms of their academic achievements. And it's part of this larger cultural conversation about romanticizing your life. So it's just that one component of it that Rory is so tied to. But in the larger sense of romanticizing your life, the focus is on enjoying the mundane and making it feel special, like not waiting for a special occasion to do something for yourself, to make things feel grand and to feel special. So I think we saw a lot of this creep up because of the pandemic. And, we're all stuck inside with little to do. And you saw everyone baking banana bread and learning how to make sourdough. And everyone was able to stop and look around them and start to appreciate the small things because we couldn't go out and do the big things anymore. So just learning to enjoy life's simpler pleasures has been a real cultural shift for us. And Stars Hollow and Lorelai were doing this 20 years before the pandemic hit. So I think Lorelai is such an excellent precursor, progenitor, if you will, to this phenomenon, because she is the queen of taking the mundane and making it special, making it ritualistic. She's so attached to her daily rituals that when she starts dating Luke and Luke is making her breakfast in her house, she's like, but I want to go to Luke's. And he's like, but I am Luke. Like, she wants to go. She wants to maintain her rituals, even when something in her life changes where she doesn't have to do that anymore. It's, part of just her enjoyment of Stars Hollow on a daily basis. She loves her little walks through town. Another thing she really romanticizes is the first snow. She always goes out for her walk. And I'm not drinking out of my I Smell Snow mug this week, but it would have been perfect for this. Although I think my Ready for Anything mug is emblematic of us changing into a new year. So I'm still good with it. But she's so much about taking simple things and making them great. The other thing that stands out to me is Rory's hammer in Hammers and Veils, when she makes her a hammer covered in like pink feathers, and Rory shows it off to Tom and he's like, that's a hammer? And she's like, yeah, my mom does that. She takes things that are boring and makes them pretty, basically. She tells the story about her making individual outfits for her liquid paper bottles. It's that spirit of taking something basic and making it, like, leveling it up somehow, that Lorelai is excellent at. And she's very good at being resourceful and creative and creating from nothingness, which is romantic at heart, right? So the other part of romanticizing your life, or that's something that's sort of tangentially connected to it, is cottagecore, which, I feel like Lorelai's house and Babette's house especially, and actually Suki's house a little bit too, really have that sort of cozy cottagey vibe that is now very popular, that, people are leaning into that sort of classic traditional feel, and Lorelai did it first. Well,
yeah,
first.
No, she did, but I understand what you're saying, and I think that's why, especially during the pandemic, we were always, doing our fall rewatches. That community was always there of loving Gilmore Girls, but I feel like when the pandemic hit, there was an additional resurgence of people who were rewatching this show, and I think it's just because innately and at its core, nothing really bad ever happens in Stars Hollow. I mean, you'll have, difficult times like Cinnamon dying and the town needing to come together for that, and their basic struggles over, fighting Taylor on, things during town halls, and should we put a stoplight in town? But we don't see your run-of-the-mill craziness and negative parts of life and bad things happening in Stars Hollow that happens in the rest of the world. So when the pandemic hit and we all get shut in and we can't do the same things that we're all normally doing, I think it was just that additional added layer of comfort to just sit back and watch a show where this town is gorgeous, it's beautiful, nothing ever goes wrong here. It's kind of like your own personal safety net at that point to know, like, it's just going to be a positive and uplifting thing, especially when you see Stars Hollow as a community and how they come together. And I think that's why, again, during the pandemic, so many more people were watching, because it was just a light of a community and a silver lining that we weren't getting anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. It was an escape, and it was fantastical without being, true escapist fantasy. We're both big fantasy fans, so it's not Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or anything like that. It feels like a real world in a simpler time when things weren't so difficult, and that's comforting to a lot of people. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and we even see that in Lorelai, I think, when Luke moves to Litchfield with
Mm-hmm.
Nicole, Lorelai freaks out, and I don't think she knows why she's doing it. There might be the undercurrent of feelings for Luke, but I think a part of it is just that it means she has to contend with change. So it's not anything super dramatic in terms of, like you said, nothing really bad ever happens in Stars Hollow. But to her, it feels like a huge change, a huge upset to her daily life, her daily rituals. And that's why she's reacting so negatively to it, because suddenly this constant, this rock in her life is no longer going to be around 24/7 to be at her beck and call to help her with stuff. And it jars her.
Yeah. And I think that's even why, too, like, there's such a parallel between Lorelai and Rory. But even as Rory ages, she always finds a way to come back to Stars Hollow when she's struggling in college, when she's struggling afterwards with her career path and not being able to find a job, and then when she gets pregnant. I feel like her trajectory is always bringing her back there. And I think it's something that we've touched upon in an episode already, the whole where you lead, I will follow sort of thing. But I will just give it to Stars Hollow just being this wonderful, beautiful community of people who are just warm and enveloping, who want to bring you back in. And if that's one of the only positive upbringings and experiences that Rory has known in terms of a community setting, it makes sense that she's going to want to come back there and be nostalgic for it, because she knows that she can step back in and see familiar faces and just reconnect with people and different parts of town, whether it's Josie's Market or whether it's Luke's Diner or whether it's the bookshop or whether it's Patty's studio. That's always just going to feel nostalgic and right at home to her. So there's always going to be that draw, and I get it.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I would like to talk about her return in the revival, but in a little bit, because there is another thing about romanticizing your life that I think is really pertinent here, and that's main character energy.
Mm-hmm.
Lorelai, I mean, granted, she is the main character of a television show. She really is a main character. But I think what makes her such an engaging one that people relate to and just we want to watch her so much because she's so entertaining is because she really embodies that main character energy, which is all about loving yourself and knowing your worth and living authentically. That's the whole crux of her emotional arc in trying to leave Hartford so that she can be herself and do things on her own terms. It's at the heart of who she is as a person to express herself authentically, and that's a huge part of being the main character of your own life.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like ever, though, that she was too drawn into Stars Hollow, though, and the nostalgia of what that town represented, that it diminished her having outside experiences or broadening her horizons?
That's a really good point / question. In a way, yes, and in a way, no. Um, I think she did have a little bit of that wanderlust. You can see it with their trip to Europe after Rory graduates. And she does get to have some outside experience. But maybe it would have done better for her earlier in her life to have more of an impact on her. Whereas now that she's in her 30s, it almost feels like she's calcified and will remain there forever because she's no longer comfortable with change or exploration in the way that Rory is. And maybe that's kind of the difference between them, is that Lorelai, when she was in her teens and 20s, is probably a lot like Rory. And she's like, I want to go everywhere. You kind of see it in Dear Emily and Richard when she's talking to Chris in the flashback. Let's go to Paris and sleep on a park bench kind of energy. But then as she goes to Stars Hollow and falls so in love and gets so used to her daily grind, she just stagnates there a little bit. And she still has some personal drive and ambition to start her own business and be a successful person on her own terms. But you're right, she really doesn't kind of get out into the world and see what else is out there. She's just perfectly content with Stars Hollow. And it's kind of the same thing for Luke. He grew up, born and raised in Stars Hollow, and he's going to die there. So that's a big part of the reason why I feel like they really found each other. And why maybe other guys weren't great for Lorelai, because they might have tried to pull her out of that when it's clearly not something she's super comfortable with.
Yeah. How do you think the inn plays into that as well, and Mia and her first job plays into that as well? I'll lead off with this. I'm sure you've seen it. It's a deleted scene that never made it into the show, but it shows after Rory's graduation, Lorelai and Rory going back to the inn, knowing that they're going to be putting in a bid on a new space. But it's a scene where they're both walking through the main area of the inn that's about to be sold. And we see Chelsea Brummett and a younger actress as Rory kind of dancing around them. And like it's a single cut scene, like in terms of like it just flows, there are no cuts in it. But an 8 or a 9-year-old Rory and a 20-something Lorelai are dancing around Lauren Graham and Alexis Bledel in this main area. And it was just a really good recall to seeing how just in love they were with being a part of this inn, and how it almost became a part of their personality. I understand why that scene never made it in. I'm not gonna, I think it was just an acting thing, like where it didn't play out well in that regard with chemistry. But the scene itself was just very nostalgic in terms of showing from an early age, with Rory as a child and Lorelai as a 20-something person, how much this inn was a part of their being and how nostalgic they were for it. And I think that also translates into why Lorelai especially is not going to be able to move on. But my original question again, how do you think the inn and Mia and that first job plays into Lorelai's nostalgia for Stars Hollow?
Yeah. Quick point before fully answering your question. For a show that leans so heavily on nostalgia sometimes, it rarely uses flashbacks. And so it might be part of why that scene felt a little weird as well. But yes, I do remember seeing that scene. It's been a while since I've watched it, but even just you describing it now kind of like gave me tingles a little bit. Just thinking about the emotions of Lorelai and Rory in a moment like that, where, they're looking around the Independence, which has unfortunately been scarred by fire, which is, awful. It was a nightmare for them when that happened. I think back to the ins and outs of inns when we first meet Mia, and Lorelai and Suki have been talking about building their own inn, and Lorelai has to tell Mia that they're looking for a place and that they want to move forward with this. And Mia's excitement and saying, like, I'm going to sell if you guys do that. Like, this might be the perfect time for that. That really throws Lorelai a curveball that she was not expecting. And again, with her calcification and inability to change or to accept the passage of time and moving on from things, you see her unwillingness to let go of what she calls her memory home.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, her hand was forced by the fire and the fact that it was going to cost too much money to do all the renovations to code. And it's good that she moved on and was still able to accomplish her own thing instead of running someone else's in forever. I think she was still going to do that. But I think maybe it burning down or burning out rather helped her in that process. And she may have had more reticence letting go had that not been the case. And now that she has her own business in Stars Hollow, I think that even further roots her in this place, and she will probably never leave, because look at what happens in season 5 when Richard suggests, hey, you should sell this to a hotel management company. You'll make more money. Someone else will manage the daily operations of the inn. You can travel, you can consult, you can do all these cool things with your life. And Lorelai turns down these opportunities because, you know, her house is in Stars Hollow. Her life is in Stars Hollow. Her daughter's nearby. Her boyfriend is there. She's happy staying put. So, yeah, she's stuck now. And it's nice to feel rooted, and it's nice to feel a part of a community where you feel accepted and you're content, happy there. But maybe she was a little too okay with the stasis of what life would be for her under the circumstances. A little too nostalgic and too afraid of the future.
Yeah, and that's where I really loved seeing Rory being able to move on a little bit more and in an easier and more transitional way than Lorelai would have, because she doesn't have the same sort of strong ties to this place that Lorelai does. But it's a bone to pick that I have with the revival, where it just seems like Rory is going to really come full circle and reroot herself in Stars Hollow. And it's not a bad thing, but it's not what I wanted for her. I don't know if you have any differing opinions on that.
Yeah, I struggle with that one because, you know, Stars Hollow is such a great place. And I understand wanting to be near family to raise a kid and wanting her kid to have that sort of like fun, simple lifestyle that she had growing up. But you make an excellent point where she always had that bug to get out into the world and do something and see something. She says it to Headmaster Charleston right at the beginning, like, I just want to be sure that I see something. And she does a little bit of traveling that we see in the show. And then obviously she's sort of like jetting off to London a lot to see Logan. But yeah, like saddling herself with a house and a kid in Stars Hollow will probably keep her from living a lifestyle more like Rachel. I think Rachel is an interesting character to kind of think about this with, you know, someone who's the anywhere but here girl and just gets too restless in a small town like this. I think Rory has what it takes to make it in a small town, whereas some people like really can't sit still and they have to kind of have that nomadic lifestyle. I personally don't understand that. I'm like, no, I'm such a homebody. Just let me stay here where I'm cozy and where all my stuff is. So I understand the impetus to want to settle down and just be somewhere and not be all over the place. Whether Stars Hollow is the ultimate right place for that, as opposed to maybe one of the outer boroughs of New York or somewhere else that she can make her own, is another question. So, yeah, I'm of a mixed mind about that fate in the revival.
Yeah. You also just made me think now too, when you say like Rachel is the anywhere but here girl. I feel like that's Jess too, where he could never really fit into Stars Hollow because he's like, this town is weird and full of jerks, but he was never going to have nostalgia for it. Nor do I think that Jess could have nostalgia for any place really, because he was just so emotionally distant from tying himself to any one community that he was just always going to float by in life and see where it took him. And that's where I don't like, that's a point of contention where I feel like maybe Rory would have fit in well with him, because that's what she wanted too. She wanted to see the world. She wanted to travel and see places and do things and not be tied down. And I feel like Jess could have potentially given her that and would have been a good partner to do that with, because Jess is not one to get nostalgic and so bogged down in any one place. So I don't know. It's just a thought I had now. We'll have to fight that out more again in Battle of the Boyfriends, but
Yeah, he might have balanced her out a little bit in like her over sentimentality and his lack of it. But then again, they might have clashed over that, you know. And from what we can tell, Jess says his life is stable at the moment, and you know, I'm assuming he's still at Truncheon, just publishing away. So it seems like he's rooted himself in Philadelphia, but that doesn't mean he has made himself a part of the community in the way that the people do in Stars Hollow. Philly is a bigger city, it doesn't have that vibe. And so it's a place where he can have both that stability, but also more energy, just that the bustle that is Philadelphia probably suits him. And, Rory lived in New York for a little while, but then came back to Stars Hollow. So she might like a place like Philly in the end, but is she going to want to be that far away from Lorelai now that she's pregnant? I don't know. And I don't know that I see Jess deciding to move back to Stars Hollow to be with her now that she's going to have a kid. So hard to say. Just because he gives her one wistful look through a window doesn't mean he's ready to uproot his entire life for her and follow her anywhere. She's just going to plop herself down.
Yeah, I agree. Jess is not that type of person, but Logan wasn't either. And that's why I think that if Rory does decide to go back to Stars Hollow and raise this child there, she is going to likely be a single mother, because the boyfriends that she's had and has, like, and Logan being seemingly this child's father, he's not going to want to tie himself down in that way for reasons that he can't and he won't want to. We've talked about that some already, and we'll touch upon that more. But if that is what Rory decides that she wants for her life, that's fine for her. But I think it just means that she's going to have to go at this alone as a single parent.
It's funny because I do love when Logan comes to Stars Hollow for the first time and they've got the hay bale maze going on. And, Rory is telling him stories of her childhood, like where she fell off her bike and scraped her knee and being one of the bulbs in the spring festival and how that was traumatic for her. And Logan seemed to find Stars Hollow like cute and quaint. And he refers to it as like colonial Williamsburg with fewer knickers and tricorn hats, which makes me think of the town's nostalgia for its own history and the fact that, it's so tied to that Revolutionary War reenactment vibe, which is, a fairly common thing that people do to connect to the past. And that is a form of nostalgia unto itself. So Luke calls out the tradition as being, pretty silly, but it's a yearly thing. Everybody is able to connect to their community and the history of this place through that. And I just find it so funny, like how into the American history they are, and how Luke calls them out. Like, I actually have the quote, like, tradition is a trap. It allows people to stick their head in the sand. Everything that passed was so quaint, so charming. Times were simpler. Kids didn't have sex. Neighbors knew each other. It's a freaking fairy tale. Things sucked then, too. It just sucked without indoor plumbing. Yeah.
Oh, Luke, ever the cynic.
Yeah. I love him for it.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I think we can all be cynical in nature at times, maybe not to the extent that he ever was, but I can understand him growing up in that community and just being like, oh my gosh, these people sometimes. Like, especially the whole Taylor versus Luke dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That man is just... Yeah, go ahead.
It's funny, like, how kind of untraditional he is in some ways, and how much Lorelai just loves it, eats it up. You know, she lives for the wacky things that this town does every year.
Yep.
The Bit a Basket Festival, the knit-a-thon. She's so attached to these events that, you know, the dance marathon, when they are
the dance.
They're dancing for 24 hours to earn enough money to buy a tarp for a bridge that was repaired. It's like, oh, we earned the money to repair the bridge at the last event, but this time we're doing a tarp because we're coming up on winter and we don't want it to get ruined. Like, this town will just do anything to get together and relive their traditions from year to year. They just find any excuse to do the same thing year after year. And Luke finds it absurd, but Lorelai just adores it and loves tradition, and she loves her, like I said, her rituals.
Yeah, I mean, the town could have pooled money and just bought the tarp without needing to do this dance marathon, but it was just a very communal thing that brings them all together. That's a fun thing to do. Personally, starting the dance at 6 a.m. would be a hard pass for me. Like, there's absolutely no way I wouldn't dance for 24 hours straight, but if you're going to do it, like, I don't know, maybe start at 6 p.m. The 6 a.m. thing was just no. But it was still so delightful to see everybody waking up and coming together. And, you know, then you get Babette and Maury, who are just like, yeah, we're just going to, like, they dance for 5 minutes and they're just like, you done? You want to go home? And it's like,
yeah. I'm done. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cute. And even that episode is very nostalgic unto itself because it's period. They are all dressed up sort of like 1940s. And, you know, so we're in modern day Stars Hollow, but they've embraced the spirit of the past for this event as well. And I think that kind of translates through a lot of the town's traditions where it feels very antiquated. You know, a man buying a woman's basket and having a picnic with her feels like it's straight out of the 50s. And even the knit-a-thon feels, you know, a little bit old school. Like they're literally just sitting there knitting.
Hard pass, but I get it.
Yeah, I tried knitting once and it did not go well, but that's neither here nor there. I can understand that they might have some fun doing it. I don't know why they would pick November to do it, but okay. So, but yeah, it's just funny how the town like really, really leans into that historical feel. Taylor Dosey is very much about honoring the past and keeping that Main Street USA good old days feel in Stars Hollow. And, you know, when he wants to modernize it and bring it into the present or the future, he does things like
sewer systems.
Yeah, he does it by putting in their first stoplight and their first traffic camera and their first... The septic system thing is funny because there's a plot in the main series and then they bring it back for the revival. They totally forgot that there was like an anecdote. I think it was Rory talking to Dean saying like, oh, we got like a sewer system last year. And then she said, or was it the revival where they're like, oh, they took out all the parking meters. Or no, they tried to put in parking meters and then nobody would pay, so they took them all out again.
Yeah.
This town is mob ruled.
Mob ruled by Taylor Dosey, but we get it.
Yeah, exactly. So they're very much living in the past. And I think that's why people are so drawn to this, because we're so stuck in our tech-driven, modern, chaotic, busy life where everything happens behind a computer screen. And so to step back from that and to... It's funny because we're watching people do it instead of doing it ourselves, but there's something sort of intrinsically appealing about watching people not do that. So instead of actually doing it ourselves, we just go watch other people do it, which is funny.
Yeah. The nostalgia factor for Stars Hollow comes from several different things, but do you think there's more of a draw in terms of the nostalgia that is coming from the town itself and Stars Hollow, or the people that live in it?
Ooh. It's like a self-perpetuating cycle where the kind of people that are going to be drawn there are drawn to the small town vibes where the town meeting still rules the day and where they still do historical reenactments and they want to be a part of that and they want to be living in a quaint small town. And so it keeps it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's hard to say because Taylor Dosey has clearly been in Stars Hollow a long time, and you have to wonder what a pre-Taylor Stars Hollow looked like. Was it like this, or did he sort of buy up the town in an effort to make it like this? Did he try to Disneyfy it? Is that what I don't know. So I imagine that it's been like this for a long time and that somehow it attracted and perpetuated people who wanted to maintain that historical charm, as opposed to other towns that were like, no, let's grow, let's expand, let's modernize. So like I said, the people who were there made it the way it is, and the way it is will attract more people that will keep it the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We've talked about Stars Hollow a lot and the nostalgia that town brings, but on the whole, throughout 7 seasons in the revival, are there any other moments of just nostalgia or characters like experiencing and going through like just nostalgic behavioral patterns that stand out to you where they're flashing back to something that was important or significant to them and you see that play out with how they're reacting to an environment or a person?
I feel like I've already called it out with the hay bale maze. Like that, if I hadn't already mentioned it, that would be the thing that would come to my mind. Is just, it's season 7 too, which is funny. It just feels like one of those moments where everybody is sort of regressing back to childhood and enjoying the nostalgia factor of this spring festival. Yeah. And yeah, it feels like early Gilmore Girls. It feels like season 1 flashing back to sort of like the Harvest Festival or maybe the Firelight Festival. So it's sort of like an in-universe nostalgia where they're like, oh, wasn't it great when we used to do that? And Taylor has been dreaming of doing a hay bale maze his whole life. So it's sort of like him living out his fantasies and again, having a nostalgia for something he's never experienced. So that one just stands out to me as a moment in the show where people are just particularly leaning into it. What about you?
For me, one of the biggest standout moments is in the revival when Rory returns to Chilton to just speak to the students that are there about what it's like to enter into a career path, the college application process. And, you know, Headmaster Charleston has her in front of a classroom of students and she's speaking to them. And you can just see how happy she is to be back there, how much Chilton has meant to her, from what it did for her educational experience, how it got her into Yale, the professors that she had there, and the friendships that she was able to establish there, and the time that she spent there. And I think that's why Charleston is able to very predominantly see that it means a lot to her and that this is potentially a career path for her that she could have pursued. But I think she does have just a lot of nostalgia for Chilton as like the institution that really just helped shape her and get her to the point in life where she's at now. So that's the biggest takeaway one for me, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe just the way you phrased the question, I was thinking the first 7 seasons and wasn't even thinking about the revival. But the revival is just like the whole damn thing is nostalgia based.
Nostalgia. Yeah.
But on the Chilton point specifically, that makes me think of her and Paris outside of Chilton as they're about to go in. And Paris says that Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, I just pulled it up. I cannot remember the books I've read any more than the meals I've eaten. Even so, they have made me. So both of them have that sort of nostalgia for it in a funny way. And they're thinking about all of the learning that they did there and how it impacted them. And I just thought that was such a beautiful moment. But yeah, I love it when she goes back to Chilton. I would love to see her go back and be a teacher there. I think that would be such a great fit for her. But I guess that sort of leads us into the revival. I think we should, spend the last couple minutes here really digging into it, because there's been this trend in media to revive things that have strong fan bases. You know, people were clamoring for more Gilmore Girls, especially because Amy and Dan didn't get to finish it on their own terms after contract negotiations with CW didn't go well for them.
Yeah.
So they were able to come back and do this with Netflix, where they were able to bring everyone back to Stars Hollow as it was at the time. A more modernized version. You see some changes, but ultimately a lot of things in Stars Hollow haven't really changed, you know?
Yeah.
Luke and Lorelai are still not married. Lorelai's still in the same house. The paper still, you know, prints the same things every year and does the same thing. The people who run the paper are
ancient,
out of date, perhaps was the term I was coming up with. Yeah, and it's funny how Lorelai fills Rory in, and it's like, yeah, nothing's changed. You've been gone a while, but you didn't really miss much. Stars Hollow is still Stars Hollow. So it's funny how they were able to sort of recreate some of the magic. They failed on a few levels in terms of maybe where characters ended up, but the fact that they were able to get everyone back together, get that WB lot dressed back up as Stars Hollow, they got so many people to come back for this. And even the side players, you know, we got Tom, we got Bootsy, we got Gypsy, we got Headmaster Charleston, we got Francie, of all people. And we sort of got Tristan,
Caesar.
but not actually Tristan. We got Caesar. You know, Aris Alvarado is so dedicated to the show and this fan base. Of course, he was going to come back. I wish we had gotten, maybe Madeline would have been great. I know that like Teal Redman isn't really acting anymore, but Shelley Cole is another one of those people who is still so attached.
Very much in it.
Very much in this fandom. But you know, we got Kirk and Lulu. We got and we got a few new ones too. Like we got I forget what his name in the show is, but Sam Pancake shows up.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the Stars Hollow Pride Parade. And there's like one gay guy in town, and everyone's insinuating that Taylor is gay, which is funny. And he's just totally not understanding what they're implying.
Yeah.
Classic Taylor. But yeah, just going back to the Dragonfly and going back to Chilton, going back to the Gilmore mansion. It's just so nice to be back. And I know a lot of people didn't love the revival. But I think the one thing that we could all agree on was that like we were just happy to be back in this world.
Yep. Yeah. Gilmore Girls is not the only show that has done it. One that really stands out to me that I didn't watch, but like Full House. Like that was such a staple in the 90s, and then they brought back Fuller House. And I remember I watched the first episode on Netflix of the Fuller House revival because I had admittedly enjoyed that in the 90s as I was watching it. It wasn't my favorite show, but I had seen it. But it was just seeing that first episode and just seeing the cast get back together in that way, it just puts you in the feels sometimes. And it's just a really heartwarming and positive moment. And again, I didn't end up watching any more of that show beyond that first episode. But more and more shows these days are doing it. And sometimes I think it could potentially be for just a cash grab or for lack of content and a network needing to produce something. So they fall back onto what's already been established because there's no creativity or originality coming to the forefront as much as there should be. But more often than not, I think it's just because there's always such a clamor from a fan base for wanting to like just reinsert themselves back into an environment and a show that they loved. And I think that's why Gilmore Girls has always been successful in that way. I think that's why the revival ended up happening. And that's why I think there's still such a push within the fan base now for a second revival, whether we'll get that or not, but like, please. But like, yeah, I don't even, whether so many people say like, oh, it would be good, it would be bad. I would want it to be good, but at the end of the day, I would kind of have that same reaction where it would just be so pleasing and heartwarming to me to see these familiar faces back on screen and living their lives and experiencing new things, that I would just, it would be at the forefront of just like, I want it.
Yeah. I want it. I need it. I would love to go back to Stars Hollow again and see what it looks like in 2023. You know, it's, yeah, that's an excellent comparison too with Fuller House, because I too was big on Full House in the 90s. That was very much popular as I was growing up. And I was a huge Mary Kate and Ashley fan specifically. I watched like all of their movies and stuff after they were done Full House too.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very big fans. And yeah, I watched a little more of the Fuller House revival than you did, but still not the whole thing. Some parts of it felt really cringy, but it was so nice to see the whole cast back together. And, you know, I remember Bob Saget passing away almost a year ago now.
Yeah.
And, you know, that felt like such an end of an era. It's Richard energy, right? Ed Herman passes away in 2014.
Ooh, that's a connection, but holy heck.
And I guess, you know, that kind of goes back to that question you asked about in-universe nostalgia, and just that whole sequence of the funeral for Richard felt like not only was it a tribute to Ed and an acknowledgement of what he meant to the show, but it was the characters really reflecting on his role in their life as well. And so it was beautiful up until the moment Lorelai drank her weight in malt whiskey and talked about having sex on a couch in the pool house during their 4th of July party. That was fun. It was fun for the whole family on that one.
Yeah.
But like even the episode Winter opens up with, it's just like the black screen and the title cards and just the voiceover of all those clips from the series. Again, the nostalgia bait is strong with this one. The original series sort of takes on this period feel, this patina of the early 2000s. And so when you're watching it, you feel like you're in the early 2000s a little bit with the flip phones and the, you know, the small TVs. Remember when Chris tries to get them a plasma and Lorelai's like, what is this? Remember when that was a big deal and those TVs were like thousands of dollars? And now you can get a smart TV for $400. Like, what is time? And bringing it into 2016 is so interesting because, you know, the references have been updated and it feels like time has passed, even though you're just watching it back to back. You're just binging it. It's funny how that works. Even when you didn't experience it in the way that everyone else did, you still get that sense that there's been a period of nothingness, and suddenly this reemergence that happens, and it's delightful.
Wishful thinking. Do you ever think we'll get this back?
My God, I hope so.
I know we both want more. Do you think we'll get it?
Yeah, they keep talking about it, and I know that Lauren Graham has a clause in all of her contracts. It's like, I get it out for Gilmore Girls, basically. Like, she always has it in the back of her mind that if it were to happen and it were the right scenario, basically everyone is like, yes, this is so special that if the opportunity presented itself and it was the right thing at the right time, we would all be on board. And so now that Maisel has wrapped up, I wonder if there's potential for something. And part of me wants, I feel like I've mentioned this before, but part of me wants a Gilmore pandemic special. Not exactly a period of most of our lives that we want to revisit personally, but I've always been curious as to like what it would have been like if we could be in Stars Hollow during that strange time in history, and what kind of impact it would have on a place that is so interconnected, where like you see everyone every day, and to not be able to do that, or to have this sort of like level of distance from each other. It might not even work because it's so integral to the show, but I'm just curious how Stars Hollow would react to such an earth-shattering event.
Yeah. And the pandemic itself is not meant to be humorous, but I can almost just like see it in my mind where, you know, people are just walking up into Luke's diner with like N95s and like bodysuits, and he's like, just what is going on? He's like, you know, how he would react, how Taylor would react. I don't know if we'll ever get it. I think that would be a fun and special side episode for us to do one of these days, and we probably will do it. But yeah, that's a good point. It would be interesting to see how the entire town reacts from an individualistic perspective.
Yeah, but to the original question,
yeah,
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And Amy, if you're watching, which I know you are, give it to me right now. Please, 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 please. What if we ask like really nicely?
Lauren, Alexis, Amy, Daniel, just Melissa, everybody.
Yeah. We need more Melissa in the next one. Like,
yeah,
we got just a bit of Suki, and I understand why. She's very busy, and she really could only be there for the one day. But like, I think that was one of the areas where it felt like the nostalgia fell flat, was because not quite everyone was there. Or there wasn't enough of some people.
Yeah, I would have liked more of her, but at least like I will always be grateful for at least the few minutes we did get.
Yeah,
but yeah, Revival.
Go ahead. I love it when she when Lorelai walks in, she's like, Suki, and she comes up and she squeezes the tube.
It's very pornographic.
Yeah. Oh my god, that was pornographic. Like, brilliant.
Yeah.
Melissa is just the queen of that kind of comedy, and I loved it. So I will take what I can get with her. And yeah, I feel like there was someone else who didn't come back, and I can't remember who it was, that I was a little salty about, but it's escaping me at the moment who that was.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Case in point, just give us Revival 2.0, bring everyone back. We need it. The fan base wants it. Yeah. Feed the monster.
We even got Dean back, even though we hadn't seen him since season 5. And actually, I was listening to Scott's podcast, and he was able to sit down with Jared and have a chat a while back. And Jared said that he was in Vancouver filming Supernatural, and he literally flew down like on a Thursday morning, filmed that scene in Dosey's, and then flew back to Vancouver that night and filmed Supernatural the next morning.
Bless you, Jared.
Guy. Bless you, Jared. And yeah, I understand the impetus to want to take that flight back and forth and just make it happen, because it was so delightful to have that. Was there anyone in the Revival you wanted more of?
We've talked about this art like one-on-one already. I know that you really appreciated seeing the Life and Death Brigade come back. And I did too. But I feel like for as much screen time as they were given, I would have liked to have seen maybe just some of that shaved off a little bit, just to give us a little bit more of Paris and Doyle specifically. Yeah. Because we're told about how their marriage and their relationship has fallen apart, but I just feel like they always had their relationship with one another was just always, I don't know how better to say it. It was just, it always seemed so weird. And I never, it felt like, I don't always know why it worked, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of them and a little bit more of Paris, because, I mean, Liza Weil is just a treasure. She's so good.
Oh, that scene in the bathroom at Chilton, when someone tries to come in and she kicks the door closed and like stands like this with her foot up on the door, and she's wearing heels. Like, that must have been ridiculously hard to film, and she so pulled it off, and it was just hysterical. But yes, I like, give me more Paris, give me more Doyle. I also would have loved to see more focus on Lane. But I would not shave the time off the Life and Death Brigade. I would shave the time off the musical. part of me loves the musical and part of me hates the musical. Like, it makes so much sense for Amy and Dan because they love theater and musical so much for them to try to like include it. And it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility for Stars Hollow to write a musical about its own history. But I think
oh no, that's exactly what they would do.
Yeah, but I think they just dragged it on maybe a little bit too long and like just overdid it. I think it was a funny concept that just went a little too far. And if you had taken some of that time and built out some of those other relationships and stories that we've missed in the interim, especially Lane and sort of what she's up to now, because we really just see like 3 minutes of Hep Alien and then they're gone again. And I'm like, no, give me more Gil and Brian and Zach and Lane. You know, I mean, we'll talk more about Lane specifically, but I didn't love what they did to her in the revival, and she needed more development or progression, I think, in the revival itself. I would have liked to see that for her. So yes, more Lane, more Paris.
Yeah, and I mean, just rest in peace to Richard, but it will, I mean, that's part of life, but yeah, it was always such a shame that he passed before that revival was filmed and took place, because I feel like seeing his interactions and his continued just dialogue with Emily would have been so marvelous and just something that I really would have hoped for. But I love what we got from Kelly Bishop as Emily anyway, and just with how she was able to transition and move on in her life after the passing of her husband. So, and I think that's just a shout out to Kelly, like just marvelous and well done.
Yeah, I was just about to reference the same thing where it's so unfortunate that we didn't get Emily and Richard, but it felt so true to life. And I think it was a really interesting area for them to explore that loss.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a strange thing to see her on her own. But I think it sort of hammers home what we've talked about with her in the past, where she doesn't know what she is without him. And suddenly she's faced with carving out a life for herself, like figuring out what to do with her time that she has left, how she wants to be spending it. And part of me randomly loves that she ends up being a docent at a whaling museum on Nantucket. Like, yeah. She's putting her history degree from Smith to good use by working at a museum and living a simpler life in a small cottage on the water. And she just gets to relax and be herself. And I love that she it's called the house itself was called, I think, the Sandstone.
Mm-hmm.
And then the house next door is called like the Clam Shed. Mm-hmm. And she makes an inappropriate joke about like what else it could have been called. Not even gonna say it here. One, because I don't remember it, and two, because I don't know that it's safe for YouTube. So
it's not. And I'm not even gonna say it myself for that reason.
I think I remember it, but I'm not even gonna take a stab because it's probably not appropriate regardless. But just go back and watch that scene and have a giggle at it. It's just such a lovely arc for Emily. She has, I think, one of the best overall character progressions from beginning to end in the show. Whereas some other characters sort of went up, peaked, and then came back down. She just sort of had a slow, steady climb with a few dips in terms of like, I'm thinking Wedding Bell Blues, not her finest moment.
No.
But, you know, in the end, she and Lorelai find a way to get on it. You know, I love the last moments of the finale of the main series when they're at Rory's party and Richard and Emily have that chat with her, like, you know, it takes a remarkable person to inspire all of this. And, you know, I admire the life you've built here. And it mostly comes from Richard, but Lorelai responds very well to it. And she said, why don't we talk about this next week at dinner?
Ugh.
So, yeah. I love that. I love that she's, you know, finally making some peace.
Yeah, for all of the troubles and the fights and the insecurities and the stressors that these women have had with one another, it was really heartwarming to see that at the end of the day, they're still willing to try and rectify things and come back to one another and have those dinners together. So I think that's just another really beautiful full circle moment. I'm sure those dinners will still be having their own moments of strife, but at least they're still making the effort to be a part of each other's lives. And that's really great.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about the episodes we're talking about this week, or about the concepts and themes we've been talking about in general?
Not particularly. I feel like we didn't talk about Christopher maybe as much as we could have, but we will eventually get to more of that later. Yeah, out of these 3 episodes, Concert Interruptus, Damn Donna Reed, and Christopher Returns, out of those 3, Christopher Returns was my favorite, just because, again, he was trying to reconnect, and I think there's so many moments where he and Lorelai tried to have like or recreate moments of nostalgia based on the lives that they led as teenagers, and it fails because they're never right for each other. But I love those moments where we at least see them trying, and we saw that there. So yeah,
I love the moment that they have when they're just sitting in her living room and she's like, "You were the guy who crashed your Porsche like 2 hours after your parents gave it to you for your 16th birthday." And then he retorts with, "And you were the girl in the Pinky Tuscadero t-shirt sitting next to me when it happened." You know, just that reminiscence. And they're addressing the fact that they've known each other for so long. And it's nice to see them reflect with each other, and for him to start to come into their Stars Hollow life and try to be a part of that is really nice. So that's kind of the beginning of his maturation arc. We start with a story of him when he's 16, and we end up with him at the end of the revival, where we see him working in the family biz and wearing suits, and you know, he's got an adolescent daughter. And yeah, it's an interesting arc to look at all the way from start to finish for them. And I definitely have plans. We have plans to do a full episode just breaking down the dynamic between Chris and Lorelai. So very excited for that one because I have a lot to say on him. But
yeah,
2025.
Yeah. Again, strap in, folks. We've been telling you the past couple weeks now. We're going to be doing this for quite some time, so we will get to everything. But if you ever have things that you want us to talk about, you can always just drop us a comment, send us an email, hit us up on social media. All links to that are in the description below if you want to talk to us in that way. But what is our next topic that we have coming up for Friday Night Dinner?
Next week, we're going to be talking about star-crossed lovers and other strangers and the breakup part 2. And we're going to be talking about young love and first breakups. So, you know, we've got, obviously, Rory and Dean. We've got Lane with Rich Blumenfeld, Todd, and Henry Cho. Those are her first forays into the dating pool that's not dictated by her mother, at least. You know, we can talk about Paris and Jamie and Tristan, Lorelai and Chris, perhaps. You know, I think there's a lot of fertile ground there for discussion about what our first loves mean to us and what they look like, and what happens when they end, because we see a lot of that happening in the show.
Yep. So stay tuned for that. That'll be next week. In the meantime, just again, if you like what you're seeing, go back and watch some of the older videos that we've already done. We always appreciate that, and any support. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, turn on the notification bell so you keep getting updates on when we're dropping new content. But that being said, as we kick off 2023, we just wish you the best in this new year. We hope it's everything that you want to be. Make some good resolutions. Resolve to always keep up to date with Gilmore Girls, because why should you not? And that being said, we'll see you next Friday night for dinner.
Bye.
Bye.